feminism has infiltrated almost every institution around not only the United States, but the entire Western world. And its impacts and devastation it's caused both on society as a whole and individuals is a toll that probably cannot be counted. But is feminism a problem in the church? Has it seeped into an institution, a religious order that is vital not only to the prosperity of the West, but also something that is close and eternal? Evangelical movements, Catholic churches, Orthodoxy, they're all different sects of Christianity. But how has feminism infiltrated the church? How has it influenced our movement? And has it left a positive impact? My guest today is author Timothy Gordon, who has written the books The Case for Patriarchy and more recently, Don't Go to College. You can get them links in the description. Timothy, welcome to Messy Christianity.
Thanks a million for having me. Good to be with you here.
Okay, so let's just start by defining terms before we talk about influence. Okay, so you wrote this book, The Case for Patriarchy. What is, and from a biblical aspect or from your perspective in Western society, a patriarchy versus a matriarchy?
Patriarchy literally means power to fathers. So this is a distinction that me and my friends, Christian masculinists, have been making to the red pill folks, is that patriarchy doesn't mean power to men simpliciter. Of course, it definitely insinuates power to men over women, but it's specifically power to fathers. And it is, Elijah, the power that built Western civilization. It's a specifically Catholic power because we have this bimodal patriarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, including the Orthodox Church. We'll throw that in there as well, where you have a lay patriarchy for guys like me that have a wife and 7 kids or 8 kids or hopefully 11 kids or something like that. And then you have a clerical patriarchy full of priests and bishops. And so it's bimodal, but patriarchy means that fathers run the show. And that doesn't sound familiar to anybody that's younger than like 85, because fathers are not running the show, because institutional capture works in such a way that the prize, the number one, if we're playing Stratego, of all of the institutions that these wicked, cow-hearted fools that run the world wanted to capture was the very institution that built it, the Christian church, right? Specifically the Catholic Church. So it doesn't sound familiar anymore, but power to fathers is what built the West until about 1900. It ran the West.
So let's talk about then how things have shifted, because I think to understand where we're at in the church, you have to understand where we're at in the world. And I find that to be counterproductive to the purpose of the church, right? You should see the world being affected by the church. But unfortunately, we're in an era of Christianity where you do have to look at the world first, because I would say that the church is dragging behind universally. And that's not to dismiss individual churches and certain sects or certain denominations that are leading the charge, that are staying true to the word of God. But overall, Christianity is losing ground, and it is losing influence, it is losing participation, and it is losing its character or the foundation of people who are loyal. And so when you talk about this idea that it started shifting around the 1900s, explain to me where this shift kind of began and how this sort of shaped and changed our culture to what we see today.
Very good. Well, there's a satisfyingly specific answer to when all this began, and it was the Seneca Falls Convention in upstate New York, held in 1848, which is the same year as Marx and Engels. Probably no surprise. At the Seneca Falls Convention, feminists such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and many others that will ring familiar if you know the torrid, awful history of feminism, they got together at Seneca Falls and they made a Declaration of Independence. It's called hilariously the Declaration of Sentiments, because it's a bunch of gals getting together to try to affect change, which is a hilarious notion. But they wrote it like the Declaration of Independence, and they put together a list of goals that are utterly familiar. Unlike the patriarchy, which really constitutes the church, which is unfamiliar, their list of goals for first wave feminism are the exact same as those of second and third wave feminism, which is another aside we should talk about in a few minutes, that there are no waves of feminism. It was always women need to be dragged, kicking and screaming, if need be, out of the home. Women need to be pushed into the clergy because that will despoil what Christianity is all about, patriarchy. Women need to be separated from their kids. Women need to be sexually promiscuous, and women need to engage a war against men, which are all of those things you associate with second and third wave feminism. So it was in 1848, that far back, that you saw a mounting of the effort that would eventuate in what's most relevant for me is the Roman Catholic tradition. It took about 100 years for the infiltration of feminists into the lifeblood of the church. And it really began in Catholic culture and in American culture in about 1950. And we can, if you want, talk about some of the high watermarks there. But the point is, it took 100 years. It did not begin in 1965 or 1964 the way people are being sold a lie. So that's just good to set the red line there.
Well, yeah, and we're not. This is not a a political show or in that regard. And I do, if you're watching this and you want to watch politics, I do run a political cultural podcast called Slightly Offensive, which you can find links in the description. But if you're watching this, you're probably watching this on Rumble as well, maybe on the same channel, so you know that we dive into that stuff. But you can't ignore politics. You can't ignore these things because humans are naturally very susceptible to outside influence. If there's one thing the scriptures have really warned us about is the warnings, right? About how easily our minds can be influenced, how easily our bodies can give up, themselves to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And so we have to take the world seriously. We don't want it to influence us, but we also can't dismiss it entirely because we're also called to engage with it, and we're also called to be the salt of the earth, right? If we're not going to be salt, then what value do we have? If we're not going to be lights on a hill, then what purpose do we have? We have to know where we're going into. And so you talk about this year of 100 years, right, of change, and this also aligns not only with the change of the female role. This is also the change with immigration and disrupting monotheistic cultures. One God, one people, one language, and then the patriarchy. This was the disruption. So with the church, though, I would say we look at the 50s and stuff, there was still this patriarchal canon. There was still this power structure. Fathers still ruled the home. But feminism, we know has this rocket ship towards popularization in the 60s. And we move in this direction. Talk with me a little bit about this Jesus People movement, the 1960s, the evangelical separation, the Protestant, split between non-denominational and denominational, and where how does that relate, right? Where the modern Christianity we see today takes root in the 60s, the popularized Christianity and feminism. Sure. How did this happen, and how did we get here?
Well, I'm most familiar, of course, with the Catholic tradition, which had a dead date there in 1962. From 1962 to 1965 was the Second Vatican Council, the 21st Ecumenical Council. There's about one per century on average. And the goal of Vatican II, very unpopular with trad Latin Mass Catholics like myself, as you've probably heard, was aggiornamento. And aggiornamento in Italian means renewal. Literally, Pope Paul VI, the reigning pontiff, John the 23rd opened it, died shortly after. And Paul VI was the reigning pontiff who closed the council 3.5 years later. He literally took off the papal tiara and he set it down, which was taken to be a kind of giving in to the world. And that's what aggiornamento means, that instead of the church leading the world, the church would begin following the world according to a less charitable construction of what the goals of Vatican II were. But you ask a trad Catholic and they say, look, this is when it all changed. This is when the power of the Pope started to break up, announced about 100 years before Vatican I. This is when feminism really crept in through a process called synodalism, which you see happening right now. It's making world headlines. In October, we have the Synod on Synodality, where Pope Francis is threatening to allow women to become third ordination, that is deacons. This is something that's never been allowed in 2,000 years. It is a form of holy orders, and it might or might not happen. So Vatican II is the inflection point. I always say, and I know you were strongly insinuating this before, and I'm strongly with you, that there was a kind of in the American culture and in the Catholic culture in Europe, there was a dormancy period between 1900 and 1962 when it was getting baked into things. The infiltration, particularly the feminist infiltration, but also the globalist infiltration, what's called in the Catholic tradition modernism, which is as dangerous as either of these two other isms, was beginning to creep up at the higher levels. So some of the most based and red-pilled popes around the turn of the 20th century, Leo the 13th, Pius the 10th, Pius the 11th, they were saying, we see modernists and feminists in our midst and something horrible is coming. And it took about 60 years for all of this to get baked into the Catholic culture at Vatican II. I know you're not Catholic, Elijah, but never underestimate for traditional Catholics the moment, the power of saying those two little words, Vatican II. For it's very divisive, and this is when it all came into the church. And I realized similar things were happening in non-magisterial ways in the evangelical churches, and the Jesus freaks and all that happened in the late 60s, early 70s. And it was a similar kind of antinomialism where there was a domestication of the gospel, where liberal Protestant theology from places in like the late 19th century, von Harnack was saying, oh, Jesus probably wasn't divine. He just had nice manners. We should separate Jesus, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, from the manners which can be easily transmogrified and perverted by us, these wicked elites, into a kind of effeminacy, which is not actually true to him. But what he's saying at times, because it's peaceable, can be easily mistranslated as effeminacy. So we'll take those values, we'll flip them a little, make him go from Jesus, the ultimate masculine man, which he was, to an effeminate man. We'll block out, we'll bracket his divinity, and we'll just make everything essentially Christian in this vaguely Masonic way. And that's what has happened between 1965 and now. And the popes of the early 20th century saw it coming. It was a Masonic takeover as much as it was a feminist takeover.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where I want to. I know this might be for some people, you might be familiar with this, but I want to make sure we have the historical context before we get into some of the implications. Right, looking at all the traditions and looking at what feminism has done to the modern church. This is to me a failure of men, right? Because I don't think feminism derives any of its power without the absolution of men willingly giving it over. And if you're not familiar with feminism, people say, "What, aren't the women taking it?" Well, whether they're taking it or being offered the power, who are they taking it or being given it from? Right? It's men. And we know for a matter of fact that men do naturally run the order of things, that they do hold the power. Because a good example is when a woman wants to get a man off her back, right? If a man's flirting with her and she wants him to stop, she always says, what? I have a boyfriend or I have a husband. And she needs to invoke the personage of another man to put another man in check, because men naturally are only put in check by each other. So today we are men and we are being influenced by feminism. We are under a gynocentric culture, a gynocentric society. And the only reason why we're there, I believe, is because not only did men allow it, but men are allowing it. So as this crept in, would you say that feminism, we know it was intentional in society, right? Intentionally ingrained for reasons we don't even need to get into today. But in the church, was it a matter of men not having their guards up, and so feminism as a force came in like an enemy in the night? Or was this something demonic? Was this something direct that, weak, feminized, homosexual adjacent men sort of brought in this egalitarianism, right? This equality of men and women rather than a hierarchy. Like, could you elaborate on what you believe, how this actually came to where we are, where, whatever it is today that Christianity claims to be happened? Because I don't like what we have, but we're here, right?
Certainly. In the first place, I would start this answer by calling on your viewers and listeners, Elijah, to reconsidering what feminism is. If to the shrewder listener observer, you might think it seems to be feminism, the beating core of leftism, modernism, communism, all of the wicked isms. This is correct. It's actually the beating core of even the original sin. Adam and Eve in the garden, this omission to act by Adam to just interface with people at his door, in this case, Satan, the dragon, led to a commission of the actual first sin. If you take the first patriarchs at their word, they all agreed, Jerome, Ambrose, Augustine, they all said woman sinned first. But it was a kind of sin by omission by Adam, which is what you're talking about. It was woman acting when a woman should be passive. It was women being expressive when women should be receptive. We even know this bodily, of course. The original sin is feminism, Adam and Eve in the garden. It is the sin that cast us east of Eden, right? That got us banished from the garden as a race. That's why you see it in all as the central set piece of all of the attacks that happened on the church, and I do mean specifically the Roman Catholic Church and the world, by P2s, Masons, all these groups at the end of the 1800s. And so that's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer, which more directly speaks to the call of your question, Elijah, is that it was a direct infiltration style attack, an ambush that was meant to look to centrists and center leftists like egalitarianism, which is wickedness. Egalitarianism is wicked, coming home to roost. And even the right accepts the story that, well, egalitarianism is basically good if you're talking about the non-based right. And it came home to roost the way the center leftists pitch it. But as a matter of fact, there were a number of very, very focused, determined elitist groups. I'm not going to get you kicked off of YouTube by mentioning certain of them, but those like P2, Carbonari, Masons, European, the most powerful groups in Europe, who had an intercepted document that Pius VIII and Pius IX kind of worked together as successors to infiltrate and then promulgate. The document was called the Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita. And what they'd said is, look, from the time of the French Revolution, the most direct assault on Christianity, Roman Catholicism, in 1,000 years, since before Constantine's day, assaults on the church don't work from exteriorly. It's like the Beastie Boys sing, if you try to talk shit, you just make me strong. The blood of the seed of the church is the blood of the martyrs. So we're good. We're kind of built to last because of martyrdom, mysticism, monasticism. You attack Christians from outside, and we have as our Godhead, second person of the Blessed Trinity, went to his death, and he said, this is the best thing you can do. Die for your friends. So you guys all do it the same. We're very equipped to deal with exterior attacks. What the Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita said, intercepted sometime between 1850 and 1870, is the way to get at Christianity and to run this institution is through an internal attack, through an infiltration styled attack. And you see, so there are actually some more intercepted documents from the early 20th century. Stalin had Bella Dodd, who made a full report, the House Commission on Un-American Activities. She was a communist for a short while, reverted to Catholicism, confessed to Archbishop Fulton Sheen, look, this is what I was doing. Stalin himself tasked me with infiltration of Roman Catholic seminaries with homosexuals, far leftist, Marxist Masons. And I myself, Bella Dodd, put 1,100 in them. So between the Alta Vendita and some other intercepted documents and then the testimony of Bella Dodd, we know that they knew that you can't attack the church. You cannot attack the church from outside. You have to attack it from inside. I'm a knowledgeable Catholic. I studied in Rome. I began a doctorate in a pontifical school in Rome. They don't have the vetting power at the seminaries that the CIA, NSA, FBI do. They don't have that. You go through and it's 7 years. But as Bella Dodd said, after she converted, I put 1,100 plants to bespoil Christianity into the seminaries. And guess what? 4 of those 1,100 are occupy very, very high positions in the cardinalate now, even in the Vatican. Fulton Sheen, for whatever reason, told her not to name names. But the point is, it worked. And that's why we have, a lot of us say that's why we even have a new mass, that was taken out of the Latin, that was taken out of the beautiful. They smashed the altars after Vatican II. They gave us Cranmer tables, no offense, Protestants, but they turned the priest around. They got rid of all the beauty. They got rid of all the incense, all the Latin, all the mystery, everything beautiful that men love and have loved for 2 millennia about Christianity. They feminized and they put a bunch of Karens working in the office, and they've been working towards making them deacons and eventually priests. We'll see this October. Bada bing, bada boom, Betty Boop. You have yourself empty churches that are dying. They're ugly. They look like monstrosities because they tore up all the beautiful altars and they reconfigured them. They're no longer cruciform even. And it's a bunch of women. The women run the parish schools. Women run the chanceries. Women surround the bishops and cuckold him and don't let his priests give manly sermons on the 9 places in the New Testament where St. Paul told women basically they have to STFU and submit to their husbands. So it's a matriarchy inside the church. The goal was accomplished.
Okay, so when we have this historical context now, and so we know that it was both strategic, and I would say that a lot of history is really decided by a few people that are intentional, and it is decided by a mass of people who are not intentional, and that's the whole problem, is that very few can manipulate. And that should give a white pill to a lot of people who feel like there's no hope, because there's so many feminists, because there's so many people out there. I do have hope for the world, because when I see, that Taylor Swift can make $2 billion, and you see people crying in the stands and, melting down, and people go, what, like, this is horrifying. Why would you, be crying over this woman? And I go, it reminds me of something good. It reminds me that people are looking for answers. They're looking for leaders, that people are made to worship, and that, the heart of men, at least people still want to worship. Like, that's a great thing, right? At least people still want someone to be their king and their God. And so I don't ever want to be so discouraging in the fact that, the whole world's messed up. It's all going to hell in a handbasket. The Bible's always warned us about that. The fact that very few, that it's a narrow path that leads to salvation, and it's a wide path that leads to destruction. So it's always going to be a few people. And so the world will always kind of be in a crazy direction. But of course, what's so infuriating about this is that it's also affecting the church. But there is a white pill to it as well, because sometimes when the church becomes so ostensibly liberal and worldly and feminized, it makes recognizing people who really do believe in the Bible and the truth more obvious. And it also requires us to not just, accept what's going on, but to congregate and to come together. And so I just want, as we transition a little bit here, that if you're listening and you're watching this, wherever you are, don't give up hope. And don't ever get into the negative aspect of, well, the church is just feminist, and so, bollocks, whatever. It is life. It's like, hey, a few people that were patient and strategic brought this into the church. And a few of us who are patient and strategic can weed it out, or at least can create separatism, so that we create a sanctuary for people who want to know God, and a sanctuary where God is welcome. So let's talk about let's go from the 90s on. Let's go here. I know you said you're not extremely well educated in this modern evangelical non-denominational. I don't think you need to be. I don't think there's a lot of education in this. I think you're familiar enough to know that the representation of Christianity has superseded just mass being changed around. It is, where I'm in Australia, it's Hillsong, right? You have a lot of these individuals where it is music centered, emotionally based, experience driven, theatrical production, modernism, and egocentric individualism, right? It's all about how you feel and where you're at in the moment. And I want to talk about this version of Christianity and feminism. Why is it, for the average Christian, or what is it that's going on that if you were to take a random person who wanted to start going to church, there's like a 90% chance that if they walked into a church, they would walk into one of the churches I just described, or at least some sort of a version of that. And the highest aspiration that the church would give them of like, if you want to change, it would be to put on a pair of skinny jeans. No hate. I used to wear those. Hold a guitar and cry on a stage, right? In front of people. That's the highest aspiration, to become a worship leader. Why is the church like this today? Can you explain that to me? Like, what the hell is this? Is this Christianity? Is this a cult? Is this just good-hearted people who are misled? Like, can you explain to me the modern representation of what Christianity is, and like how we're here, why we're here, and what the hell I'm viewing? Because I hate it, and that's all that's available in my area. But I literally hate it, and I'm going, and it's a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we are, because Pope Francis, if you haven't heard, even the Catholic Church, is canceling the reawakening of the Latin Mass, and basically forcing young people who are supposed to like the emotive, happy clappy Hillsong style reconfiguration of the Catholic Church to copy the Protestant churches, and they didn't. The boomers and the generation half a generation older than the boomers figured, here's the new mass. It's based on the Hillsong model, what would become the Hillsong model. And, young people will love it. Only old people like the Latin Mass. The Latin Mass is eternal. It's here to stay. And they are enraged. Old leftists, old Peronist leftists like Pope Francis turns purple with rage when the concept of young people and the risorgimento of fervor and enthusiasm for the Latin Mass was caused, between 5 and 10 years ago. This is something I, had a small hand in. It became really popular about 5 years ago to go to the Latin Mass, and Pope Francis hates it. So we should talk about the basic. I want to talk about feminism's role in this, but the call of the question is a psychological one. It is, why did Augustine write that all cities will be either a city of God, where God is God is the one at the altar being worshipped, or a city of man, where man is what is being worshipped? And it's what all of the shrines to Baal were. They were really an attempt to worship human beings, which is always an attempt to worship Satan once you get rid of the mask. There's no third kind of city. All cities are Christendom, or they are a satanic self-worship of man enshrined up on the altar. It's no coincidence that all the iconography changed in the 1960s in the Catholic Church and in Protestant churches to being man-centered. And that's all you're talking about. And I wouldn't say it's similar between and among Catholics and Protestants. It's identical. It's the same movement. It's aggiornamento. It's literally flipping from the paradigm of world follows church. In other words, the men modeled their lives after God. Flip that around, and now it's the church follows the world, and man is up there. It's like holding a mirror back. He's not looking at a crucifix in the center of a cruciform church anymore. Even Catholic churches after the 1970s were built in the round. So you're all just, what are you looking at when you look across? You're not looking at the crucifix, or for us, the consecrated host up on the altar, centered in a cruciform church. If it's built in the round, you're looking across at another schlub in skinny jeans, which is exactly what you're talking about. Iconography, as everyone now knows because of Jordan Peterson, and not to go full Jungian on you here, because I'm not a Jungian, but it is true that iconography is deeply infused even into the intellects of IQ 85s. It's not like you have to be a lit theorist or something like this to understand what's going on. When you're looking across at the consecration of a host into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus at a mass, which is what a Roman Catholic mass actually is, and you're not looking at the back of a priest doing this, you're either looking at the front of a priest, if it happens to be a building that's still cruciform. If it was built after 1970, you'll be looking at some schlub picking their nose, or looking at his fingers or whatever. You're not looking at God on the altar. That's very, very important. And of course, in the latter 55 years, it's been pervasive in all of Christianity. And like you said so well, in a really pithy way, Elijah, it's a few people determining the world. It feels like a black pill, but for the reasons you enumerated, it really is a white pill. And everybody else, all the normies, assuming that this is the consensus of the masses or something, some egalitarian thing, which is just kabuki theater. It was really built to look that way.
So but in that perspective, right? Let's go into the experience of this. It is defeating for individuals, especially men, to not have many great examples or to not feel that drive and to feel that there's a opportunity for them to be men. And I think it's really confusing, especially for men like myself, who I'm from, the heartland of Los Angeles. I I would say everybody out there is pretty queer, in LA. And I use that not in the modern sense of queer, but just like traditionally, right? Like if you moved from LA and you went to a school in Michigan, you're probably going to get punked on and beat up because you're going to be a little bit weird, a little bit fruity or whatever. And so I'm from a place where people are strange and they're encouraged, right? And there's a lot of cities like that in America. Portland is one of them that comes to mind, right? Seattle, the West Coast has something weird in the water. Everybody's
Yeah.
a bit strange. And so a guy like me grows up there. I don't see a lot of great examples of men. Like the men that I know that would be prototypically considered like, physically masculine, were all fat and barely, making it financially. And, people who were making it financially were kind of gay or just, although they were gay probably. But they were also just like not very moral or like had a lot of boundaries, right? So there's not really this structure. And so then I go, I become a Christian and I find out about God. I go from being agnostic. And I wouldn't say that the advice or the structure I was brought into gave me anything of value when I actually hit hard times. Like when my mom died, my morality really slipped, right? I started abusing alcohol and I drank to cope and things like that. And when you're drunk, you act like you act stupid and you do dumb stuff and I think about it that there was nobody that I knew and nobody that I was surrounded with from my church experience that was able to offer any semblance of real help. Everything was always like feminine, like just give it to God, man. Just
Yeah.
praise God, and even the prayers were like useless. Like, and I mean this genuinely.
Yeah.
Like it's like, Lord, we just pray for blessings on his life. We unleash the Spirit of God, and like, dog, do you have the power to unleash the Spirit? These are very weird words, right? They all sound normal to me then. And I'm like, you know what I needed? I needed clerical strength. I needed God. I needed people to just understand where I was at. And I realized that I even got isolated from the church, which is a very feminine, idea. When you're sinning or you're messed up, you're in the out group because you're ostracized because because women like to be accepted and like to go along. There aren't men just telling you the hard truth, pulling you back in, being like, hey, what the hell are you doing? Type of things and trying to get you back in line. And I feel like the experience of the church has led a lot of men away from it. Because as I'm trying to figure out how to become a man, the last place I would want to go is to a modern Christian church to find out how to be a Christian. Um, is there still hope? Like, can men still find God and find out, and be a true expression of a man by going to church? Or is it like most men who I think love God and are trying to follow them? They've said, I don't want to go anymore, right? I find myself better without it and more able to follow God. Like, what is your message to men? And not, I guess not how did we get here? Cause we talked about it, but like, what is your response to that, right? That experience that I think probably 3/4 of men who are trying to follow God that are red pilled probably agree with me on or share that are like just kind of frustrated, right? And find church to be hurtful to them, helpful to their wives. Women love going to church, but the men, it's
Mhm.
like, what is it doing for me besides, creating a community for my wife? I don't have an answer to that. I'm genuine. That's where I'm at right now.
Well, we discussed right before rolling tape going to the Latin Mass. You said you're kind of curious. Go check it out. It's patriarchal. The priest has his back to you during the consecration. Like I said before, everything is what everyone is fantasized in the most positive sense of the term that Christianity would and should be. If you don't go to a Tridentine Latin Mass, go to one of the Eastern Rite Catholic Masses. Go to a divine liturgy, which is the exact same liturgy that Greek Catholics have, modeled after the Greek Orthodox liturgy, which is beautiful also. Tons of mystery, smells and bells. It's patriarchy. Elijah, when you were, and I'm an Angelino from 4 generations of Angelinos myself. I was born in Thousand Oaks, California. You were craving after the patriarchy, my friend, the bifurcated patriarchy that I was talking about before. Priests, male, but previous to infiltration of whatever, 4 out of 5 bishops and priests were homosexuals. It was mostly just straight celibate men that were, a lot of times, if they're Irish, a lot of ex-boxers, a lot of really manly dudes before the very, very deliberate, laser-focused institutional capture of what happened in the early 20th century. They would tell you, what, you're still looking at porn? That's soft. That's, for one thing, that's feminism. One big bone I have to pick with a lot of the red pill is that's all feminism. That's soft. Stop. What's the boxer's virtue? Mick tells Rocky, women weaken legs. This thing is, if it's all about the facts, which aren't supposed to care about our feelings, then porn and contraception and all this shit, it's soft, man. It's very, very, it's as obvious as the digestive system has one purpose, right? Which is the efficient metabolization of calories. Well, the procreative system, the reproductive system, has one purpose. Both the metabolic and the procreative systems have a second yield, which is pleasure, if you overeat or if you abuse one of the 2 systems. But don't do that. That's what soft cream puffs do. That's what feminists have tricked many, many men into doing. Jezebels, Liliths, Eves. So that's what you used to get from Catholic priests, and used to get fathers that were attracted to that. And you can get it today if you go to a Latin Mass or one of the older Eastern rites. So it's still there. But of course, it's important, perhaps more important, to talk about why I'm a far right-wing Catholic speaker. I go around the country with my family if I'm invited to give a talk. And if I'm traveling, I have to find a Catholic church in whatever American city. 99 out of 100 times, it'll be hard to find a TLM. We'll wind up at a Novus Ordo, and it's all the same. It's the Hillsong phenomenon that you're describing. It's basically Protestant. I mean, you still have the real presence of the Eucharist there, and a priest in the line of the apostles to confect it, but it's basically culturally the exact same. And it's all women. The men stay home because there's nothing for them there. Like full circle, reminded you ab initio from this talk. When Satan wants to divide families, he establishes a matriarchy. He goes to Eve. Based St. John Chrysostom, one of the earliest fathers of the church, said, woman was tricked by a beast. Adam wasn't tricked by a beast. He was tricked by a woman who's his partner. But Satan knew of the 2, he could trick a woman. You put the woman in charge, which is counternatural. It's proto-transgender, right? Putting women in charge or telling women to do men things, which Satan did at the original sin. And it's what's been done full force, en masse and in masse, since, the 1960s. It can be turned around. That's the white pill. And I love how you said that.
Yeah, so I bring this up with the white pill on this because with the feminism sort of infiltrating in, how much responsibility then do we have as Christians to change this, both in our families and in our churches? Because like I have out here in Australia, I think in the city I'm at, I think it's only like 27% identify as Christian, and it's like less than 1.3% that have a biblical worldview, right? So you got about almost 99% of people in a Western society like this that was, by the way, nearly 90% Christian, just like 75 years ago, right? I mean, it's crazy. And I imagine, even if it was 90%, probably half that had a biblical worldview. It's very rare today to find people who really care about these things. And half the time when you meet people who are biblically sound, for lack of better words, are a bunch of wussies, right? They are
Yeah.
feminized. They're already taken over by the feminism. So they have everything correct in terms of their morality, but in terms of their authority, they have none. And I've told my wife this to her face. I go, I might have made a lot of mistakes in my life, like most men have. But you know what? I know who God is, and I've met God, and I know, and I've seen the men that He used in the Bible. And I've seen the way that the men have tried to justify their wrongdoings. And so I will never try to do that. I'm never going to try to elaborate and say, my mistakes, or this or that in life is right, or anything I did in the past is okay. I'm not going to justify it and try to, bring homosexuality into the church and feminism and and all of these weird like spiritualisms and things that people do today, right? That people are trying to justify their sins, actually God is okay with promiscuity because, and God is okay with gay, and God is okay with usury and all these things, right? God loves Israel, right? This is like the kind of things that people are trying to do. And so I don't want to be a part of that system. So I will just come up and say, yeah, things that I've done in my life are wrong, but I would rather continually make mistakes and try to do right and repent and know God than accept this form of Christianity that is being delivered to me, which for me makes me weak. And when I followed Christianity in the examples, I was a pushover. I was poor. I and not for the right reasons, right? I was I was not masculine. I was not taking in my roles. And so I reject that entirely. And I'm finding myself to be here that I'm seeing the biblical man and the men that God used versus the men that the church says that you need to be. What is a biblical man? What is a patriarchal masculine man? And what are his responsibilities? Like I said, both in the family and in the church, because just pointing out the problem does nothing. Giving an example of the solution to me is what's most helpful for men, at least in my case. Go, okay, that's the target. That's what I'm trying to reach. So what is that?
Well, I happen to run a podcast every Friday morning with Elliott Holt, Strongman Elliott Holt. He's got like 1 million followers on his channel, taught a lot of young men how to lift weights properly. He became Catholic, and we're buddies with masculinist Will Noland, most popular masculinist who's a Christian in England, and my friend Dr. Michael Robillard, who's an Army Ranger and Oxford trained philosopher, and myself. Every Friday we run a show called Sea Mask, floating between our 4 YouTube channels, Christian Masculinism, and we're all Catholics, and it's all about virtue. Not being on the one extreme, a Ned Flanders Christian, a guy that doesn't know how to throw a punch, has probably never been in a fight, that looks like he lets all the world run over him. Basically, infused pacifism, masquerading as Christianity, which is really what the elites did. They filtered into the top, and they're like, oh, all Christians, by dint of the ideology of Jesus, have to be pacifists. It's totally wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Or on the other hand, men have the false dichotomy of, basically being a scumbag. 80% of what they've heard Andrew Tate say is really true. I mean, it's 80% of the truth. It's what we're saying in true Christianity. Just go read the scriptures, right? 8 or 9 times St. Paul says in the epistles, women, stand down. Man is the glory of God. Woman is the glory of man. Women, I forbid you to teach. You may teach younger women how to obey their husbands, but I forbid you to even speak in the churches. It's not permitted. Women, wives, submit to your husbands in all things. Popes have added glosses on this, in all things aside from grave matter or sin. And what happened in again, I know we're like a song with one note. We keep saying, "Oh, this happened, infiltration, infiltration, infiltration." But you have to say it. Even John Paul II, who was considered a right centrist in the church, made up this doctrine out of whole cloth. 2,000 years into Catholic teaching, scriptural teaching, that Ephesians chapter 5, where it says, "Wives, submit to your husbands in all things," that's a mutual submission, which is spatially impossible. If you see a head-on collision, submit means to go under. Both cars can't go under, right? So a lot of young Catholic women, even at the faithful Catholic colleges, are being indoctrinated. And so there's a real reawakening in America, and a mini reawakening in places like France with the traditionalist movement, with trad wives. This is my books. My wife's book, Ask Your Husband, says, be a great wife. Next to next to Abram, Sarah, next to the Lord, Sarah called Abram her Lord. And here's a book about how to be a great wife. It's a great life. It's a beautiful life. And young people are learning. When I taught at a Catholic school, they would see my wife's and my relationship. My wife's an amazing looking woman. She's my best friend. Like Aristotle taught, you can have a best friendship of unequals in book 8 of the Nicomachean Ethics. And I would teach them this. Yeah, this is an amazing life. They'd say, but Mr. Gordon, my dad says, happy wife, happy life. My dad says my wife is really in charge. And I'd say, well, that's diabolical. That makes men not want to be there in marriage, which is why men put off getting married till their 30s now. And it makes women heinous harpies, giving them power when they were never meant to have power. The patriarchy makes everyone happy, men and women. There's something, a woman called, a pair of social scientists called Wolfer and Stevenson did a study after women into the workplace in 1970. And they called it a paradox, but it's not a paradox of declining female happiness. Why do women get every 5 years 1 unit of measurement more unhappy? And they're the most single white women and women who are married and live in the burbs are the 2 most unhappy groups in society. Why? Well, because they've been taken out of their natural environment where they live as queen with a regal throne. When they are second in charge in family, they're allowed to stay home by day. Their husbands protect them, earn for them. They can sleep in. Men get up earlier than your wives, be strong, protect them, remind them every day, both by virtue and by word, that you're the boss. And it's a beautiful life. These people are very, very happy. This few that clings to nature, not only scriptural teaching, but nature. So that's the answer to all of the riddles, Elijah, is just do what's natural. There are lots of hard teachings in scripture. Jesus even says, is this a hard teaching? People are leaving my side. Men being in charge of their wives and children is not one of the hard teachings in scripture. And I can tell you, in Roman Catholicism, where I'm a familiar name, for this, myself writing this book, just saying, look, men need to be virtuous leaders. Don't be a coomer. Don't be a pervert. And my wife writing this book, Ask Your Husband, women need to be best friends who are the followers and helpmeets of their husbands, to use the papal term. We got come after really hard because it's very, very countercultural to say these things, even though it's the most obvious truth disclosed by the New Testament, the Old Testament, and before that, the godfather of the natural law himself, Aristotle. Everyone knows it's true.
Yeah, and I think this conversation could go on for a long time, and it'd probably be good to also have you on my political podcast as well. Coming up for a panel or something on this topic, because I think disagreements make me laugh a little bit, because with this idea of female power, the one thing I'll tell you that I saw a post, and this could offend some of the female viewers, but I'm okay with that. Is that this guy was dating a feminist, and he was on Reddit, and like most guys today, right? He's just slightly confused, unhappy, probably on SSRIs, doesn't really know why. And I think a lot of men and women don't really know why they're unhappy or why life isn't satisfying, but they know it isn't. And we know that that's true based on the prescription refill orders with psychiatrists and the bunk, in the entire bunkness of psychiatry today. However, he was like, it was really crazy because, like, my girlfriend was always saying that I'm just like, there's something wrong with the way I treat her and I'm too distant. And he's like, but I'm pretty stoic and I didn't know what to do. And tried treating her like I treat my dog. And he was like, I just started being excited when I greeted her when I came home, and giving her little rubs, and speaking to her in a softer tone and loving her, and giving her these directed bouts of attention and affection. And now our relationship's fixed. And I thought, how sad is it for a guy that like there is so little advice, so little truth, so little example of the dynamics between men and women, the dynamics in general, that he's learning he's learning from his dog how to treat a woman, you know? Like it's pretty wild. And I'm not saying treating like a dog isn't
Yeah.
the like an animal, but meaning like he never even knew just the fact that women, need some directed attention and affection and these things. And so one of the sad parts of feminism is I feel like that women are missing out on what actually makes them happy. And that's where a lot of the red pill community gets it wrong. It's like, oh, it's male centered, male this and that. But in fact, when you're centered, it's not about being centered on men or being male centered or like, and I'm disregarding women. It's when you remove the order of the patriarchy, women suffer. And when you actually put men at the top, it doesn't mean you're putting men on the top of their value, but at the order of their value, the order, right, of authority, which actually brings women to their highest value. Women are
Yes.
not happy when they're above men. They're not happy when they don't respect men. They're not happy when they're not under the protection of men, and they can't be happy because that's why they're all crying about all these things. Everything is about because men aren't in their place and men aren't allowed to be in their structure, right? Women feel they're looking for to the police, the government, everything, to their jobs, to their HR departments, towards everything to be the man in their life. You have a problem if a man disrespects you, you should be getting your husband to go confront that man. You don't go to your HR
Exactly.
department. If you feel unsafe on the street, you don't need the police to walk you home like in Sweden. You need men to be with you at night to make sure that you're safe, right? We need a restoration of this so that women can feel free. You're unhappy at home and you feel lonely. You don't need cats. You don't need your pornographic books. You need a man to be there to make you feel safe at night so that you can, read your books, you can, pursue your hobbies so that you can raise your kids and you have a safe structure. And so I kind of want to end on this of this restoration. For men who are listening, for women who are listening, what's some practical advice in some ways that they can reflect the patriarchal nature that God intended in their own homes, in their own lives? Let's talk about just two groups to end with: single men and married men, or men that are about to get married,
Right.
that are in relationships. How can they reflect that patriarchal structure and bring that into their personal lives to live a more satisfying and fulfilling life, despite whatever examples they're seeing out in the real world?
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Number one, so what all young men should do is try to meet a beautiful, submissive young virgin in high school. Lock her down, get married as you graduate high school, if you can. Get a trade. Hopefully you guys are classically educated and you've actually trained your minds to be virtuous and sharp. You don't need to go to college for that. In fact, they won't teach you about what built the West, Christian Aristotelianism, in college anymore. So going will actually guarantee you're moving the opposite direction. Instead, get a trade, read philosophy on the side. I teach philosophy actually online. Become an Aristotelian, marry your sweet high school, hopefully virginal girlfriend, have a beautiful life together. Say, look, it's good. We're going to be a little bit naturally poor. This is the nature of chronology. We'll be a little more poor at the beginning. We'll be poor together. It'll be beautiful. It's kind of fun. Everything is an adventure when you're young, like Edmond Dantes says. So we'll be 18, 19, 20. We'll be married and poor. By the time we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children, we'll be getting a little bit richer because I'll be advancing in a trade, whether I'm an electrician or a plumber or whatever. Always remind your wife she's at home. You protect her. You sleep in. I get up early, right? I'm the king. You're the queen. I'm in charge. You will be there at the home doing what women love to do. The stay-at-home mom thing is bullshit. It's a stay-at-home wife, right? It's beautiful to be young and married. You get up and go to whatever your first real white-collar job is. Your wife stays at home. And the wives, the women that have had home ec removed from them, what am I supposed to do with my time all day? These are like the kids that were looking forward to going back to school at the end of summer. I was always on the verge of tears the last weeks of summer because I dreaded going back to school so much. What kind of loser are you? You don't have, well, here's what women can do. My wife has this in her book. Stitchcraft, cook, bake. She loves sewing, gardening, keep a journal, read, get a meaningful prayer life, put a kneeler in your closet for one thing, take a nap, do anything, go swimming by day. If you live in an apartment, go to the pool, take a walk by yourself, pray some more, get the house in order for your husband. So you're in a lovely mood. He comes home and then you can spend time together. One of you needs to be in a good mood. How does this contrast to the hellscape that is the modern herbs or burbs? It doesn't matter. It's the same thing there. But they have this horrible schedule, right? Both parties, husband and wife, go off to work together. They don't work together, but they leave the house at roughly the same time. They get home when it's getting dark out in the fall or winter. The home is dirty, unclean. They're squabbling because you don't have labor specialization. Nothing smells nice. There's nothing on the stove. Nothing's prepared. It's like, once again, dirty. There's nothing. There's an art to keeping a home, by the way. That's why it's called being a homemaker. My wife decorates differently for each of the seasons. It's amazing. So much better than my apartments when I was in college. Was after I got out of college and got this wife who loves to keep things beautiful. It's lovely. She makes herself beautiful. Some women get into making their own clothes. But imagine the contrast. Again, they get home. You got to fight over who makes dinner, fight over who cleans it up. Even then, you're just sustaining. It's not like the house is extra clean. You're both tired. Neither of you is in a good mood because both of you went to work. One of you needs to be in the good mood. That's the helpmeet, the wife. Both you go to bed early. You get up. It's a sexless life, by the way. You get up early. You do it all over again. That sucks. Oh, and by the way, my neighbor, very kind dude, says what most men say. Happy wife, happy life. The wife is the boss. Somehow the egalitarian always means the woke party, the woman, the minority, is the boss. It's horrible. Then you live under the shadow of a tyrannical government. Anytime that this person who's not fit to be boss, but is called boss, gets in a bad mood, everyone has to head for the hills. And you're dividing all this labor in a non-equitable way, in a way that doesn't make sense. It's stupid. And then once you start popping out kids, all the money goes to childcare. So I guess I'm speaking to both single men and married people all at once, because there was a single component and a married component. Always remind your wife, I'm the leader. I'm in charge. I can handle whatever. I mean, when I was a young guy, I was silly. I was a rocker. I got in way too many street fights. My wife saw that. And so she always knew that even though I wasn't a pervert, I was always under control and temperate in my relations with the opposite sex. But I could protect her. And we were friends before we dated because we were each going out with other people. I said, I'll always protect you. I'm your leader. I'm your king. You're my queen. You just do what I say, and I'm going to give us a real nice life. When I decided third year marriage, hey, let's move to Rome. I'll get a PhD. We'll bash around the eternal city. We won't depend on either of our families. That's another thing that's really important for a young married couple. Don't depend on either of your parents. Go do something where you depend solely on each other. She said, okay, I'm scared, but I know you can handle it. If some guy stands too close to him, your wife, you got to make her feel safe. If, like you said, this is not the job of the nanny state. Always reminders, should be daily reminders. What the worst thing that can happen is when these husbands, 98% of them, I'm being charitable, it's really 99.5. They indulge their wife like a petulant child out of fear. And the wife wants whatever the toy is, like a petulant child at Target or something. She wants the toy in the meantime. But you can't respect someone that as a woman, you're supposed to be looking up at your husband, but you're looking across at him or down at him. Yeah, you got the stuff. She got to buy the 5th bottle of perfume this month. That's too expensive for your budget. She wants the stuff, but you can't sexually be attracted to someone. This is hard to understand as men because we're supposed to be the leaders. It destroys their sexual attraction for their husband. This is what accounts for all the marriages when they're overindulged. And I mean, my wife's sitting in the next room. She'll say, yep, that's what she's saying in this. Don't be a jerk. Be her best friend, but be her leader who is her best friend and say, honey, yeah, we can't do that. You know, that's not right. She'll say, oh, okay, you're right. And all of a sudden she knows you're not trying to be Andrew Tate. That's one extreme that doesn't even understand that he's pitching feminism in some sexier form, some more masculine looking form. You're being a real man. You're protecting her. You're looking out for her. When the kids come along, you're looking out for them and you're saying, no, but I love you. And I'm the servant leader who will always have your best interest at heart. We got married when we were big kids. That's the other thing. If you get married when you're older, everyone's too set in their ways. Everyone's got jobs, habits, preferences that they can't dispense with. It's hell on earth, man. So this is what I would say to everyone. Have lots of kids. Start having lots of kids when you're young too. By the way, your cancer rates for the female body parts, the 3 female body parts, I won't say them on YouTube here, they all get cut in half for a woman that has 5 or more children. They won't tell you that. You don't know that. But breast cancer, uterine cancer, and ovarian cancer, I'll go ahead and say them. They get cut in half if you have 5 or more children. I'm a bit of a hypochondriac. My wife is my best friend on planet Earth. I want nothing to happen to her. I've fought guys for standing too close to her on a basketball court. This makes me feel good because I have 7 kids. So start having them young. Be her hero. Have her be your best friend. Have a beautiful life together. Have her keep the home. Keep her away from the perverted eyes of all these, disgusting freaks out there. And you're going to have a beautiful life together. You just got to get started much, much younger than the elites are telling you to do.
That is absolutely good advice. Timothy, I really appreciate having you on. If people want to find you, if they want to follow your work, if they want to keep up, I know you mentioned it a little bit before in the show, but they might have forgotten, and your links are in the description. So you can find directly if you're listening on audio or wherever you are. But let me know how can they find you? How can they follow you? And where can they get more information from you?
Yeah, thanks. On Twitter, I'm Timotheology at Timothyology, 2 E's in that, Timottheeology. My YouTube channel is Timothy Gordon. The show is Rules for Retrogrades, and I have 3 weekly podcasts on politics and culture and Roman Catholicism, a smattering of all of them. I also run a patriarchal matchmaking site, which exploded. We were trying to just match 15 trad Catholic men with 15 trad Catholic women and try to get some marriages within 12 months. And it just exploded. And all the shit talkers online were saying, oh, you're going to have a sausage fest on your hands. It was just, I told Pearly Things this when I was on her show. It just exploded. And it was mainly young women that are like beautiful virgins or beautiful young women, 28, 29, 30 with low body counts that are like, I just want a dude to talk and sound like Elliott, Holt, Nolan Knows, Michael Robillard, Tim Gordon. That's all I want. I don't want a pervert. I don't want a guy I can boss around. I've been looking and the guys aren't out there. So it was flooded by women. That's at www.return.us, RETVRN.us. We've been amazed. It turned into a near full-time job, just matching all of these Catholics with one another. And then, of course, you can get our books, My Wife's and Mine, on Amazon. Ask Your Husband and The Case for Patriarchy. Michael Knowles was really into this one and pitched it around Daily Wire. And now you hear guys like Matt Walsh saying, what is a woman? I did a video on this. What is a woman? I was disappointed that was on 3rd order gender dysphoria, on trans, because that doesn't really affect anyone. It's gross and weird. But 1st order gender dysphoria, a man acting like a woman, feminism, that's what affected 99 out of 100 households. It sounds like Matt Walsh has been, he likes this idea. So I appreciate all the support I've gotten on The Case for Patriarchy. Find my books at Amazon.com. I have some more books besides. I really appreciate your time, and this has been great fun. Elijah, I hope to come on with you again.
Yeah, I will. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching. To all you guys who continue to support this show, don't forget that you can support directly on Locals. So I have a community. This podcast is not monetized and I don't make any money from it. I'm just trying to develop a more Christian-centered exploration of life, as you know. So when you go there to elijahschaefer.locals.com, you can donate, you can become a member, you can join the community. There's a lot of radical, like-minded people. You don't have to be a Christian to join, but it's a direct way to support both me and whatever we're doing on the movement. And also don't forget to support the guest as well. I really really appreciate it. My name is Elijah Schaefer. Thanks for watching another episode of Messy Christianity, a series from a messy Christian me who's had a pretty crazy life, but is trying to understand and fight for the truth. Have a great rest of the week. And as I always say, may God bless the United States of America. I am signing out.